Dino Bravo was an icon in Quebec. He was an idol.
I am proud of my heritage.
He was big. He was strong. He could bench press 500 pounds. He had the size and he had the weight.
He was really like the Hulk Hogan of Montreal.
Dino appears to be in great physical condition.
I mean, he could do no wrong.
I feel at my best when I enter that square circle.
Can't turn your back on Dino Bravo.
Dino Bravo combined relentless ambition with a fiery intensity that made him a superstar in Montreal, Quebec, and saw him wrestle the biggest names in the WWF.
He did work with Hogan. He did work with Ultimate Warrior.
Did you see that power move by Dino Bravo?
With Dino Bravo, either he liked you or he doesn't like you.
He loved it. Live dangerously.
He thought nothing could touch him.
For me, mafia always scared me. The word mafia scared me.
I said, listen, I don't know if you're doing the right thing, but it's not for me to judge what he did.
His world was the wrestling world. It wasn't the organized crime world. He screwed up.
L'analyse des lieux a permis de retrouver des douilles de calibre 22 et 3,80 tirées de 2 armes automatiques.
On this episode, we'll examine the tragic consequences when a wrestling enforcer is pushed out of the spotlight and into a life of crime.
Let that be a lesson for everybody, me included, that everybody's touchable.
In days, rumors began to surface that it was a mafia-style execution. 30 years later, Dino's unsolved murder remains one of wrestling's darkest mysteries. Those closest to him have never spoken openly about what led him down such a dangerous path until now.
Mon père, c'était le bout en train de la famille, c'était le rassembleur. Quand je le regarde sur les photos, je me rappelle sa voix. Fait que je le regarde souvent. Je suis Claudia Bresciano, la fille de Dino Bravo, qui m'amenait dans le vestiaire des lutteurs avec tous les lutteurs. Moi, j'étais petite. C'était vraiment impressionnant pour moi parce qu'il était très grand. Il y avait des costumes assez spectaculaires avec des brillants, d'autres avec des masques. It's my favorite. I never want to give him kiss. And when he gave me kiss, I was always like swiping. So he said, "Okay, give me kiss with your nose." Dino Bravo sous son nom de lutteur, parce que son nom c'est Adolfo Bresciano. Je suis Diane Rivet, je suis née à Montréal. Je l'ai connu où je travaillais dans un bar et le gérant de la place, qui connaissait aussi beaucoup la boxe et la lutte, est en amour avec Dino et il me disait toujours quand j'arrivais là, Dino arrive, puis je disais c'est qui Dino?
Weighing 230 pounds, Dino Bravo!
J'avais à peine 19 ans et donc il m'offrait de venir me reconduire à la maison. Alors c'est comme ça un petit peu que l'histoire a débuté.
My name is Patrick Laprade. I'm a wrestling historian. I first started watching wrestling when I was 6 years old, and Dino was just that superhero to me. He was big, he was strong, full of muscle. He was really like an action figure come to life.
In the early 80s, Montreal's international wrestling is the leading promotion in Quebec, and Dino Bravo is its premier star.
We had almost 2 million people watching the TV on Sunday morning. It was very, very big. My name is Tony Mioli. I was a wrestling promoter from 1971 to 1986. During international wrestling, we had Rick Martel, King Tonga, we had Raymond Rougeau, Jacques Rougeau, and the Giant. But listen, Dino Bravo, he was the biggest star here in the 80s.
Dino Bravo was very hard to get to be friends with, but once you were, he stood by you, he had your back. That's what I liked about Dino. My name is Gino Brito. Not wrestling now, but I started wrestling in 1961, so I think I know a bit about the wrestling. Well, Dino Bravo was more than a friend. He was almost family.
The wrestler were seeing us getting into the arena, meet Gino and Dino. Oh, here's the Italian connection.
With his 2 business partners by his side, Dino isn't just international wrestling's top draw, he's also co-owner and matchmaker.
Dino was the boss here of the company in Quebec. And we were like superstars in our own home, in our own province, and Dino created all that.
Maybe if you could just give us a brief introduction to who you are.
Do you know who I am? I'm the Mountie! My name is Jacques Rougeau. Been wrestling for 41 years. But Dino Bravo, I've known him since I was 18 years old. Dino was the booker. It's like when you watch a sitcom on TV every week, they have storylines. Well, the booker is the one who creates the storyline.
Dino, how was it to have that full packed house right behind you during that main event?
And he created himself. He beat everybody when they came in, and he worked around his image and his future.
The fans here obviously solidly behind Dino Bravo.
Je pense qu'il était tellement comme passionné, puis qu'il en mangeait tellement de la lutte qu'il voulait juste devenir de plus en plus famous.
Over my shoulder, the belt emblematic of the International Heavyweight Wrestling Championship. This belt worn so proudly for 4 of the last 5 years by, of course, the great Dino Bravo.
Casting himself as the main attraction doesn't always sit well with the other wrestlers, especially those looking to make a name for themselves.
He'd book himself in main event, and he'd put my brother and I like in 3rd or 4th match before intermission. But for me, in my head, I was a main eventer. There wasn't always sunshine between me and Dino. I wanted his spot. He was the boss. And me being unhappy, Pat Patterson and Vince were calling me. They said, Jacques, would you like to join the WWF? And I said, well, I don't know. It's a jungle out there. Do I want to go out there alone in that jungle?
As part of its plan for global dominance, the emerging World Wrestling Federation set its sights on Montreal and is intent on poaching the town's top stars.
It was unheard of to have wrestlers make the kind of money that Vince McMahon could make these people.
By the 90s, it was a new wave. It was something new. It was fun to see Hacksaw Jim Duggan, whoa, and Coco Beware with his birds, and it was ooh yeah with Miss Elizabeth. It was an era that came and just, it was fun to watch.
Welcome to WrestleMania 3!
Vince is a very intelligent individual, and he knew that he needed Dino Bravo on board if he really wanted to draw good crowds in Montreal. And in 1985, early 1986, there was a big match that was teased here in Montreal. It was a dream match. Hulk Hogan against Dino Bravo.
As a matter of fact, that would have been a match you could have put in the Olympic Stadium and draw at least 40,000 people. And it never materialized.
They got scared that Dino Bravo would actually be more popular than Hulk Hogan in Montreal. And at the last minute, just decided to cancel the match. So Dino was not happy with WWF and decided to actually try to bring international wrestling to a level of popularity where they could actually compete with WWF. He was in a mood where, I'm not gonna let him ruin my business. He was fooling himself, and there's nothing that he could have done to match what WWF was coming with.
Despite Dino's blind ambition, international wrestling is no match for the WWF showmanship. He's outclassed in almost every single way.
Now, either you get out of the way or you compete against an elephant.
When I left to go to WWF, I did what I had to do, and my dad and Dino, they both begged me. I swear to God, begged me. Don't go, because if you go, the WWF's gonna come in here and they're gonna kill everybody. But it was too late, the damage was done.
The talent, they all went for Vince. The Rougeaus went for Vince, Martel, Tonga, everybody went there. Once your talent's gone, you can't eat. And that was it.
It was a downfall that was, I think, that you couldn't avoid.
C'est certains moments des frustrations avec le WWF. Et évidemment, il se remettait en question. Il savait pas où aller vraiment. Il savait pas ce qu'il voulait faire.
By the end of 1986, Dino Bravo's once thriving company is on life support. Now he must decide whether to continue to fight for his independence or to side with the enemy.
Cette photo, c'est quand il a eu le titre de champion international. Et je pense qu'il était très fier. On peut le voir là, dans son visage. Je peux faire la même pose avec la revue comme si c'était une ceinture. Non, c'est une joke. Mettez pas ça, hein? Off record, please.
In order to support his family, Dino Bravo must decide if he can let go of his pride and join the opposition, Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Federation.
Comme tous les Italiens, le chef de la famille doit représenter la famille, doit supporter la famille, doit protéger la famille.
So, of course, he was looking to take care of his family, and Vince McMahon offered Dino money that Dino couldn't refuse. It was something like $300,000 guaranteed, and with everything else, he could have made over $1 million, something that he could have not dreamed of doing if he would have stayed in Montreal.
I think Dino came to his senses, and he came to WWF, and that was funny, because when he walked into the room, hey, how you doing, Dino? See, you know, you did the same move we did, but there was never animosity. It was almost like when Dino came, he put that behind him, and he says, okay, let's move.
Moi, je me rappelle quand il était dans la WWF. J'ai rencontré Jake Destin qui était venu à la maison, et sur mon perron, il avait amené son sac avec son immense serpent qui a sorti. Puis, non, je pense que je me suis mis à pleurer parce que j'avais vraiment peur. Bien, il partait à rire. Mon père, quand il y avait des tout ce qui avait rapport avec l'émotion, l'intensité, ça le faisait réagir. C'était comme une nouvelle vie de lutteur, complètement une nouvelle étape de sa carrière.
To make a French-Canadian strongman fit within the cartoon world of the WWF, Dino was paired with one of American wrestling's most iconic personalities.
Can you tell us who Jimmy Hart is?
Oh, my God. The best man in the business. Some managers took the credibility away from their boys. Jimmy Hart was the guy who knew how to give credibility to his wrestler.
Look at him, man. Look how strong he is. Woo! I went in the ring. I was a baritone. When I came out, I was a soprano. He's the world's strongest man. I guarantee you that. Look at me. The wrestler was always the Cadillac. We were kind of the hood ornament on a Cadillac. He was in great shape. He could go 30-minute matches if he had to. He could go against Hogan. He could go against Andre the Giant or any of them. It was a big man's territory, and he had the size and he had the weight. By being with me, it kind of put a rocket on his career. And all of a sudden, he started moving up the card a little bit more.
And of course, when you make a lot of money, your lifestyle goes up. And he had the Mercedes, that big $1 million house. He had this, he had that.
We had our houses built at the same time. That's how we got to be next to each other.
Moi, je lui ai demandé pourquoi une grande maison à Laval. Il y avait un garage avec une auto rouge. Il m'a amené à ce garage-là, puis il me disait, ça, c'est ton auto. Puis ça, je vais m'en souvenir toute ma vie. J'avais 4 ans. Je pense que c'était de montrer qu'il réussissait au niveau carrière. Et, pas pour le public, là, mais dans le fond, je pense que c'est une satisfaction à lui personnelle de vouloir avoir plus.
Dino's lavish new lifestyle comes at a cost, as Vince McMahon makes radical changes to his character, from all-round Canadian hero to an anti-American bleach blonde villain.
So for someone who's not familiar, how would you describe who Vince McMahon is?
Wow! That's a question I didn't expect. Vince likes to test the boys who stick up to him. You don't see an Italian with blonde hair. You know, not in Quebec.
Mais moi, je suis pas coiffeuse. Mais on a essayé, et puis on a fait un bleach dans les cheveux, puis on a même brûlé sa peau tellement que le bleach était fort. Et là, il est devenu méchant et blond. Donc, c'était vraiment pas beau. C'était comme une mop sur la tête.
Well, everybody thought it was funny when he came in with the blonde hair. Ah! And then Dino was pissed, because Dino's a very proud guy. He was so embarrassed, but he had to do it because that's what they wanted. That's the difference in when you're in a small-time league like international wrestling. You believe in yourself, you build, you create yourself. When you go to WWF, you're a number, you're a character, you're just part of a show.
Competing with the WWF's all-star roster, the French-Canadian flair that worked for Dino back home gets lost in translation.
I think everybody looks at merchandise and looks at sales and looks at what they can do with you. Let's just say Dino Bravo, he had that broken English.
You've never said it right under button, brother love. Man, they wonder why I hate this country.
It was hard for people to understand what he might be saying, and so that held him back a little bit.
And I'm gonna teach you a lesson.
Dino had his routine. He had his punches, he had his boots, he had his routine, but he was never the kind of guy to discover something new. I think the hardest thing for Dino was doing jobs for guys that weren't on top. Well, I'm talking getting beat. The most important thing in wrestling is your valeur marchande, which means what you are worth on the market. And if you are a guy that the fans see on TV week after week getting beat, even if it's a show and it's fake and it's organized, people don't believe in you anymore.
He was getting older. You gotta remember that when he was like at his peak of his career back in international wrestling, he was like in the early to the mid 30s. Now he was late 30s, early 40s. He still saw himself as a top guy.
When you go to WWF, there's one thing you don't bring there is an ego. All the shames and all the things you're afraid of, it's gonna happen. Unfortunately, Dino had bigger plans for himself than Vince had for him.
Vince figured, you know, bring in new talent, new face, new blood, and you're out.
By the end of 1992, Dino's days with the WWF are over when his contract expires and is not renewed.
No, he just came and told me, hey, I'm leaving. He said, look, I'm burnt out. I've done everything I can. I want to spend time with my family. We hugged and everything else, and that was basically it.
And all of a sudden, it stops. There's no more income. And you don't have a pension in wrestling or nothing like that. That's where the trouble starts.
With his career over, Dino has lost his life's passion and his livelihood, and is left staring into an abyss. After 6 years on wrestling's biggest stage, Dino Bravo's career is over. He must look for other ways to support his family and decadent lifestyle.
I think that once you get with the WWF and you leave, where could you go? You know, it's like playing professional baseball and then dropping down to a minor league contract. You know, as soon as you drop down, it's like, oh, his career is over.
If everybody has good times in life, makes money, and everybody has bad times in life where they will need money. I've been there, done that many times.
Il était un peu inquiet dans son futur. La maison était énorme, on avait des comptes qui rentraient à pleine porte, comme on peut dire, puis il fallait survivre. C'était quelqu'un qui avait été dans le monde de la lutte toute sa vie, puis c'était OK, qu'est-ce que je deviens demain matin, ou qu'est-ce que je vais devenir, qu'est-ce que je vais faire de mon gagne-pain, de ma vie, puis de ma carrière. Il est en mode survie, puis il veut faire de l'argent, alors c'est...
With no professional experience outside of wrestling, Dino has very few options. What he does have is connections.
Montreal is not far from the United States, and the corruption is widespread for the police and the government in Quebec. That's why the mafiosi like Montreal. I am a journalist with interest in mafia and organized crime. The Cotroni family was very active under the authority of the Sicilian family Rizzuto. Vic Cotroni was the leader of the first mafia family in the history of Quebec.
Everybody knew who Vic Cotroni was. It was like the so-called father of the mob here in Montreal. Vic Cotroni was also a former wrestler. He wrestled back in the 1930s under the name of Vic Vincent. Dino Bravo was actually related to the Cotronis because Vic was Dino's uncle.
Ça, c'est qui? Pas Cotroni, ça? Ça, c'est Cotroni, si je me trompe pas. On a un souper de famille. Pour moi, c'est de la famille, les Cotroni. Il était dans notre famille, en fait.
Faut le dire, là. C'était pas un gars qui avait un dossier judiciaire. C'était un gars qui avait des contacts. Et il y a des gens qui vont dire, c'est pas parce que tu es vu avec des gens que tu fais partie. Mais ça dépend. Le groupe Cotroni était puissant au niveau de cette période-là, au niveau contrebande de cigarettes, contrebande au niveau de la boisson. C'était un gars imposant, c'était un gars qui avait une belle personnalité, et je pense que les gens de la mafia italienne ont voulu d'une façon l'approcher. Moi, je pense qu'il a peut-être été naïf, et souvent, l'argent fait faire des choses.
Qu'est-ce qu'il faisait?
Bien, il était imposant.
De collecter, c'était inquiétant.
Bravo avait une stature très imposante. Quand tu vois arriver deux gars dans la porte, tu dois de l'argent, tu les reçois gentiment.
Et c'était les gros bras, qui n'avaient pas peur de rien, puis qui étaient forts, puis il l'avait mis dans ce rôle-là.
He was like a $60 million man. He had no fear of anything and no consequences. There's nothing could happen to him.
Dino's past life as a wrestling powerhouse means he has all the brute force a debt collector requires.
We've kind of heard stories about Dino kind of had a little bit of a temper. Is that true?
Yeah. Oh, temper. Oh, no, he had a hot temper. Very, very hot temper.
Dino Bravo was a big Montreal Canadiens fan. And if you're a Montreal Canadian fan, you hated everything about the Quebec Nordiques.
I'm not gonna name you the player, but one time in a bar in Quebec City, there's a player that said something.
I'm 18 years old. I'm drinking. And I'm coming down the stairs, and then Dino says, hey, that's a hockey player from the Nordiques. And me, with my loud mouth, I'm drunk, half drunk, I go, the Nordiques. That's all bullshit. So he backs up against the wall and he puts himself in position like that, and I start running with my fist, but I'm running towards the wall and he ducks and I hit the wall. And he grabs me by the shirt, and I swear, I would have probably had the beating of my life. And Dino took him and he sidestepped and he says, hey, let him go. And then he made up something to Dino.
He said something about phony. And the guy had a nice Corvette. Dino picked him up like you'd pick up a rag doll and ran his head right into the Corvette, just out of nowhere. You know, the guy just went down like a sack of potatoes. So you think I'm a phony? Come and try me out. Believe me, you didn't want to be around him when he got mad. You would have put a gun to his head. He says, don't point a gun at me. Shoot me right away because I'm coming for you.
As Dino heads down his new career path, his wife, Diane, senses trouble.
Il a commencé à avoir des nouveaux amis que on n'avait jamais connu personne de notre vie. Je sentais pas que la vibe était nécessairement bonne. C'était pas vraiment des amis, là. C'était des connaissances avec qui il voulait faire affaire. Puis c'était pas un bon environnement. Il rentrait dans un monde inconnu. J'ai commencé à être très inquiète sur lui, sur sa vie et sur notre vie aussi.
It was very dangerous because if you don't know the rules, so you're in trouble.
One night, Dino calls me. Hey, Jacques, can you come and see me? I'm like, Dino's calling me to go see him? We're not that close of friends. We respect each other, but we're not that close of friends. And I said, okay. I said, I can't go today, but I'll go tomorrow. He says, come and see me as soon as you can. That was his last words to me.
That night, there was a hockey game. I call him, I said, Dino, what are you doing? He says, I'm gonna watch the hockey game.
And the next morning, I'm at the gas station. Now I'm going to see him. The gas at the pump, the guy says, yeah, your friend, your buddy there, he got it, huh? I looked at the paper, the front page of the Montreal paper. He got 11 bullets in the body and 7 bullets in the head. That's a rough way to go.
Are there any details that you wish to share on that final day?
Non, j'aime mieux pas parler trop de revenir dans cette énergie-là ou ces émotions-là qui ont été dramatiquement difficiles.
Close to midnight on March 10th, 1993, Dino Bravo's wife, Diane, pulls into the driveway with 6-year-old Claudia sleeping in the back seat.
Il faisait tempête cette soirée-là, une des plus grosses tempêtes de l'hiver. Cette soirée-là, j'étais au ballet avec ma mère.
C'est sa conjointe, Diane Rivet, 28 ans, qui avait quitté la maison à 21h avec sa fille de 6 ans, qui a découvert le corps en revenant peu avant minuit 30.
Almost the first one to know because his wife got back home and we had the house one beside the other one. She rings at the bell and I see her crying with Claudia in her hand. They come in the house, said, what are you crying? Dino is dead. I said, what did you say? It's like the biggest shock I ever had in my life. If you would have taken a 2x4 and you hit me in the back of my head, you wouldn't have hurt me more than that. I said, are you crazy? Yeah, he was shot.
Je me suis rendu sur place. Lui, il est assis dans son fauteuil. Il est en train de regarder la télévision.
It wasn't no scuffle. His wife and family were sent away, and he was just sitting there like he was waiting for it to happen, you know? Then you hear all kind of different stories, you know, about what happened. Well, was it a robbery? Was it a break-in? It was so sketchy on everything.
Dino had been shot 11 times, 7 bullets to the head and 4 to his body. A pistol and a machine gun are found at the scene, but strangely there is no sign of forced entry, and the door is unlocked.
Les circonstances entourant la mort de Dino Bravo sont encore nébuleuses. Il semble d'abord qu'il connaissait son ou ses agresseurs, puisqu'il n'y a aucune trace d'infraction et rien n'indique qu'il était sur ses gardes. Il semble également que le travail a été fait par des professionnels. Seule cette vitre brisée par une balle indique qu'il s'est passé quelque chose à l'intérieur.
The mysterious and brutal circumstances of his death leaves Dino's family and friends in a state of shock.
I waited and the funeral, went to the funeral.
I don't know what to tell you. It was the worst time of my life.
C'était pas facile parce que aussi, j'ai réalisé c'était qui vraiment ses amis, ceux qui étaient là. Et évidemment, j'ai eu des déceptions, puis bon, c'est sûr que d'autres hypothèses et d'autres pistes arrivent en dedans de toi, là. Tu te dis, ah, c'est lui, c'est lui, c'est ça, c'est ça. J'ai fait un dessin de ma famille. J'ai dessiné ma mère, mon père et moi. Et puis je lui ai apporté ça dans sa tombe. Tous les gens derrière moi se sont levés parce qu'ils trouvaient ça tellement pur qu'un enfant. Mais je l'ai pas reconnu sur le coup. Mais j'ai reconnu ses doigts, ses mains. Il avait les mains croisées, puis mon père avait tellement des gros doigts, des grosses mains. Puis les ongles rongés jusqu'au sang, que j'ai dit ça, c'est papa.
To see his daughter there, so young, that she didn't understand exactly, you know how sad it is.
On m'expliquait que mon père était parti au ciel rejoindre les étoiles, que j'allais plus le voir. C'était dur pour moi de réaliser qu'il était vraiment plus là, en fait. Je pense qu'elle l'a réalisé plus quand elle a commencé à aller à l'école par des amis, puis que les gens savaient qui était son père, des choses comme ça. Donc, c'est là qu'on s'était avec, puis on lui a expliqué un petit peu plus de détails, mais encore là, dans la tête d'un enfant, là, il y a une certaine limite de choses qu'on peut dire, là, la compréhension est...
The details of Dino's murder dominate the headlines in Montreal. Yet despite all the coverage pointing to a mafia-style execution, questions surrounding who did it and why remain.
C'est un gars qui a fait une belle carrière dans le domaine de la lutte, qui a représenté les gens du Québec, finir de cette façon-là.
Monsieur Bravo aurait confié à un proche avec qui nous avons parlé ce soir qu'il craignait pour sa vie. C'est là où on en est rendu. Donc.
Ah, mon Dieu, mon père, il n'y avait pas d'ennemis. Tout le monde l'aimait. Il aimait le monde. Je sais pas comment il aurait pu se faire des ennemis, à part que si quelque chose a mal tourné.
I honestly think that when Dino was at the end of his days, that he may have done something that he wasn't supposed to. A lot of rumors run. And he must have realized at one point, you're screwed.
But the true depth of Dino's involvement in organized crime will stun the wrestling world and beyond.
The door must have been unlocked because there's no forced entry, or he let somebody in. I wouldn't want to go that way.
Est-ce que la porte a barré? On me dit que dans cette résidence-là, la porte n'était jamais barrée. Ils ont peut-être entendu voir que sa femme parte, que sa fille s'en aille pour aller faire le travail. Alors ça, c'est une des hypothèses, que quelqu'un, il a reçu la visite de quelqu'un qu'il connaissait.
Police examining the crime scene of Dino Bravo's murder discover 17 bullet casings from 2 different firearms on the living room floor. This leads authorities to believe that 2 assassins are involved and supports the theory that his death is linked to organized crime.
The neighborhood he was living in Laval was in Vimont, which is like a very upscale neighborhood.
A lot of mafiosi from the new generation, they moved there. At least 2 people who were living near Dino Bravo were killed at the same time.
9 months earlier, mafia accountant Robert Caverson was shot in his home just down the street from Bravo's house. 4 months later, and 2 streets away, a cigarette smuggler, Ghislain Renzo, was also killed. The police, aware of Bravo's ties to the Catroni family, look for connections.
Dans les 48 heures, on a une idée. Jamais, jamais, jamais une information valable, positive est entrée aux informations de la police.
3 days after his death, a crucial piece of evidence is uncovered.
On laisse entendre également qu'il y avait une somme considérable d'argent à l'intérieur de la maison.
Un montant d'environ 55 000 $ qui comprenait une cargaison de cigarettes de contrebande. À un moment donné, il y a eu un vol de camion, puis on n'a pas pu savoir où est allé, la marchandise. Puis là, il y a quelqu'un qui a dit, on y a une perte de 50 000. Pour les enquêteurs, la mort de Dino Bravo est reliée à une affaire de 50 000 $ concernant la contrebande de cigarettes.
Est-ce qu'une valeur de 50 000 $, est-ce que ça, c'est une raison suffisante pour tirer quelqu'un?
Il y a des gens qui sont fait passer pour moins que ça, et puis surtout dans ce domaine-là.
By the early 1990s, organized crime is flourishing in Montreal. Alongside the mafia are warring biker gangs and smugglers operating out of First Nation reserves. What connects them all is the lucrative business of contraband cigarettes.
The natives were suppliers for the smugglers, you know, and all the cigarettes came from the reserve.
Il m'amenait n'importe où. Je veux dire, j'étais comme son amie. Quand on était seuls ensemble, quand ma mère n'était pas présente, il m'assoyait en avant dans l'auto. Il m'amenait surtout chez les Indiens. J'avais aucune idée ce que les Indiens représentaient pour mon père. C'était leur ami.
Je ne sais pas comment il a nécessairement rencontré ces gens-là. Sûrement quelqu'un qui a présenté, puis à un moment donné, c'était comme officialisé. Je m'occupe avec des amis de la contrebande de cigarettes.
Voici les cigarettes à plumes qui viennent de ces réserves.
Ça se détaillait combien à l'époque, en 90
oh, ça devait être 5 piastres la cartouche.
Yeah, a lot of people smoke them because you paid half price for a pack. Thousands and thousands of cases of cigarettes I hear were sold. Thousands.
Did you know that he was involved in cigarette smuggling?
Yeah, well, of course I knew. Yeah, he told me. I said, well, everybody, at that time, a lot of people were into that business because everybody smoked and everybody wanted to pay less money. So is it from that? I don't know. Is it for something else? I don't know. Because if I knew, believe me, I was so close to him, I would like to have that revenge for him.
The only wrestler that I know of that Dino talked to about his organized crime life prior to leaving wrestling was Rick Martel.
Martel declined to be involved in this documentary, but in 2007, he gave a rare interview revealing conversations he had with Dino about his life in organized crime.
Dino went to see the Indians, and the Indians were big wrestling fans, you know. So when they saw Dino, oh man, you know, so they started dealing strictly with Dino. So Dino had the monopoly with the Indians because the Indians, you know, they have the river there. You know, they can pass cigarettes like crazy or whatever.
J'en avais aucune idée dans quoi que s'était embarqué. Vraiment aucune idée.
Control over the narcotics trade is in a constant state of flux. Each criminal group is looking for an edge, even if that means crossing into somebody else's turf.
The cigarettes business was doing so great that the cocaine people, you know, saying, hey, look, maybe there's some money for us in there too, you know. So the big cocaine guy apparently went to see Dino and said, look, you let me in on your cigarette deals and I'll let you in on some cocaine deal. So what apparently happened, they did some kind of agreement, and Dino had a $400,000 shipment in some warehouse somewhere, and it stayed there for like 3 days.
A few days before the murder, the police seized a large quantity of cigarettes in a warehouse. They made surveillance of the warehouse, and they saw Dino Bravo with people who were on investigation.
And on the third day, when the cocaine guy went to pick it up, the RCMP and all the police were there. So they were blaming each other. Dino said, oh, you should have picked it up the first day, it never happened, and you shouldn't let it sit there. And so there was a lot of heat.
Dino screwed up and would have made the organization lose tons of money.
It was a big seizure, $400,000. It's enough to be killed.
Ils ont fait des enquêtes, ils ont barricadé la maison, ils ont fouillé partout dans la maison. Ils devaient nous revenir, on n'a pas eu de suivi, on n'a pas eu de nouvelles par la suite. N'ayant pas de pistes, ils ne pouvaient pas continuer leur recherche. C'était pas clair, c'était quel clan, qui, où, quand, comment, pourquoi.
It was so violent, and the way they did it, the mafia, they're more classy when they shoot somebody.
I didn't hear the thinking was that the killer wanted police to believe there were two shooters.
The person who killed him was a friend. That's what I think. Sitting in the couch with your remote control, when there's someone in front of you, it can't be a stranger. It has to be someone you like and you trust. That, for me, is the definition of mafia for me.
Je serais plutôt porté à penser que ça aurait été les ailes.
In 35 years, I never heard that natives killed people off the reserve. The motorcycle gangs, maybe it's their style. They are more violent. That's why maybe the bikers execute a contract. Are the natives behind that contract? We don't know. It's a mystery for everybody.
This is a beautiful picture. Dino Bravo in blonde, and Claudia, his little girl. Of course, the little girl was always around him. And here is me and Dino, well, walking here at the arena. We were getting ready to work. So these are the best memories of my life. I miss him every day. What could have been? What could have been? Questions with no answers.
Decades after Dino Bravo's brutal murder, friends and family still don't know if they'll ever find out the truth of what happened and why.
C'était difficile à savoir, même si on s'est posé des milliers de questions pendant quelques années. On se demandait qu'est-ce qui s'était passé. Alors, on a juste continué à vivre le quotidien. Puis avec ma belle-mère, évidemment, elle avait la force de juste vivre sans son fils. Puis moi, je suivais un peu aussi cette force-là pour aussi élever ma fille. Puis d'avoir l'air d'une maman normale avec son enfant qui est veuve à 28 ans.
Aucun objet a été gardé. C'est ma mère qui avait ça en sa possession. Puis au moment du drame, elle s'est départie de tout parce que c'était trop difficile pour elle. Donc, pour faire son deuil, c'était clair qu'il fallait qu'elle se départisse. Elle a tout donné à la famille, aux amis. Puis c'est correct. C'est correct qu'elle ait fait ça.
He started wrestling in 1970, ended up in 1992. That's a 22-year career. So that's the only thing he knew. That's the only thing he could do. And there's not a lot of jobs you can do which will give you several hundreds of thousands of dollars aside from organized crime.
Dino Bravo always made sure that there was harmony between the boys. Dino knew how to create a team. If I had to start my life again, that would be one part I'd never change. The time that I had a business in Quebec working for Dino Bravo.
Mon père, il a laissé comme héritage de la passion. Les gens qui parlent de mon père, les fans, les vrais fans de lutte qui parlent de Dino Bravo. Écoute, mon père, c'était un volcan, une explosion. C'était autant qu'il pouvait être gentil dans son rôle, qu'autant que quand il était méchant, il était dans son personnage. Donc, je pense que la plus belle héritage qu'il a laissé aux gens, c'est d'être passionné.
Then there's some people who will talk about, hey, I remember his wrestling thing. But then that generation's going to go away. But believe me, the way things are, people will always keep reminding, because there'll always be stories that will come out about Dino, how he died, and did he die from the bikers? Did he die? That will stay with him. And that's too bad. But that's the way it is. You know, you gotta take the punch.
Mon père, c'était la personne ressource. Tout le monde se confiait à lui, tout le monde voulait qu'il soit là. Ça a créé une immense peine, un immense vide, plus qu'immense. C'est même pas le mot, là. Même encore aujourd'hui, après 25 ans, tout le monde est encore triste de ça, de la perte de mon père. Ma famille a été fâchée de ne pas trouver c'était qui le coupable, là, extrêmement fâchée de ça. Mais aussi, je pense que c'est mieux comme qu'on le sache pas. Parce que de le savoir, c'est juste d'être encore plus dans la négation, être encore plus fâché après la personne qui a commis ce geste-là. Je me dis que dans la vie, on récolte ce que l'on sème. Donc, peu importe où est-ce qu'elle est, j'espère la personne qu'elle a eue, qu'est-ce qu'elle mérite. Je reste avec de beaux souvenirs de l'homme qui était, qui m'a donné une belle fille, dont je suis très, très fière. J'aimerais que les gens se rappellent de lui étant un homme fier de représenter le Québec au niveau de la lutte, au niveau de sa profession. L'homme le plus fort au monde et surtout un bon coéquipier au niveau des amis, puis un bon père de famille et un bon mari. Je le pardonne d'avoir pris des mauvaises décisions parce qu'il a fait ça pour nous, mais que je l'aime puis que j'aimerais ça qu'il soit là. J'aimerais ça qu'il soit là puis qu'il serait grand-père aujourd'hui de 2 magnifiques enfants. Puis mon fils, il lui ressemble tellement, là, c'est sa copie. J'aurais tellement aimé ça qu'il joue à la lutte avec lui dans le lit le dimanche matin. Ouais, j'aimerais ça qu'il soit là.
The Quebec police were contacted for this documentary, but they declined to participate as this case still remains open.
You know the old saying, Shakespeare, somebody said, the evil that men do lives after them, but the good gets interred with their bones. It should be the other way around. Think about the good and, you know, the rest, try to forget it. And try not to repeat it. That's it.
As they call 911 and state that they had seen a body in the roadway on Cemetery Street in Cowpens. Cemetery Street, an ironically ominous name, serve as a silent witness to the grim scene. The discovery of a human body in such a vulnerable public location is always profoundly shocking, especially when utterly unexpected, interrupting the rhythms of ordinary life with an indelible mark of tragedy. First responders, those crucial sentinels who bear witness to humanity's darkest moments, arrive quickly at the scene. They found no identification on the man, a circumstance that initially deepened the mystery. Without immediate identification, the victim remained an enigma, a puzzle piece missing its corresponding context. However, the unique intimacy of Cowpens then played a crucial role. One of the officers on the scene, an individual deeply ingrained in the community's fabric, possessed that vital, localized knowledge, she realizes she saw him about an hour ago. This fleeting recognition, a casual interaction, became the first thread in the tapestry of the investigation. Earlier that night, at about approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, she was at a local gas station. While she's in line checking out, she sees the individual Brent Tesner. She knew him. Everybody pretty much knew everybody down there. This detail, mundane in its ordinary context, now became critically important, anchoring Brent to a specific time and location shortly before his untimely death, providing investigators with an invaluable temporal marker. Officer Wolf's quick memory and local knowledge would prove to be one of the early, unsung acts of astute police work. Officer Wolf's recollection provided further crucial context to Brent's final moments. She gets up. He'd been drinking and might need a ride home. She does try to offer him a ride. He says he's fine. He lives, not far down the road, maybe a mile, and he's walked this route many times. This detail, a poignant memory of a compassionate offer extended and politely declined, painted a picture of Brent in his last hour, a man making a simple decision to walk home, perhaps feeling capable despite his state, utterly unaware of the deadly trajectory his life was about to intersect. It underscored his familiarity with the route, his comfort in navigating those well-worn paths under the cloak of night. At first glance, after the body was discovered and awaiting movement, it was unclear what had precisely happened to Brent after he left the convenience store. The initial assessment of a scene of unknown trauma is always challenging. Shrouded in the ambiguity of the moment, they can't really see any sort of physical signs of harm. They don't see a gunshot wound or anything like that. Officer Wolf, processing these early observations, initially considered less sinister possibilities. Officer Wolf thought maybe it had something to do with him being under the influence or some sort of a heart attack. This perfectly rational initial hypothesis, based on limited visual information and common circumstances, underscores the inherent difficulty of early crime scene assessment, where context is still minimal and the full, horrifying picture remains veiled. But as the medical professionals, those harbingers of undeniable physical truth, prepare to transport the victim, a subtle yet critical observation was made that irrevocably altered the course of suspicion. Once paramedics load Brent into an ambulance, the officer spots an important clue. The movement of the body, the shift in its static position, often reveals what stationary inspection might miss. There was entire marks or tread marks on his clothing. This finding, unambiguous and irrefutable, was a seismic shift in understanding. The presence of tire marks on a human body is an unequivocal indicator of vehicular impact, immediately moving the death from natural causes or an ambiguous accident to one definitively involving a vehicle. So she starts to believe that maybe that this individual was hit with a car. The implications were profound and immediate, transforming the nature of the inquiry entirely. The question then shifted from what happened to how and by whom. Do we need to have highway patrol out here in case this was just a random hit and run by a drunk driver? This query, born of protocol and initial assumptions, reflected the predominant belief that this was likely a tragic accident, a consequence of impaired driving and unforeseen circumstances. To local police, accustomed to the vagaries of rural life, a late-night hit-and-run accident seemed the most likely scenario, a sadly common occurrence rather than a sinister plot. However, the intuition of seasoned law enforcement officers, always probing deeper beneath the surface, suggested a more chilling possibility. Their analytical minds recognized subtle incongruities that hinted at something far more sinister than a mere accident. Right near where he was hit, there looked like there was tire tracks. The presence of such tracks, indicative of vehicular movement, immediately engaged their forensic sensibilities. There's no way to tell what direction the car was coming from, how fast it was going, what kind of car it was, but it appeared that the car veered off the road, then came back onto the road. This seemingly small detail was, in fact, critically important for an investigative mindset. A vehicle veering off the road, and then inexplicably back onto it in the immediate vicinity of where the victim lay is highly unusual for a simple, unavoidable impact. It suggests a deliberate deviation, a purposeful course alteration that veered sharply into the territory of intentionality. Their professional training compelled them to explore the darkest of possibilities. They have to consider that the driver may have intentionally swerved to mow down Brent. The very language, mowed down, evokes a chilling image of deliberate, aggressive intent, transforming a mere traffic incident into a cold, calculated act of murder. The dreadful, emergent truth began to crystallize. It was possible that somebody floored it and ran somebody over and then left them to die. This nascent dread, initially a whisper of suspicion, now began to take terrifying shape in the minds of the investigators. The fundamental challenge for these dedicated investigators, a common affliction in the nascent stages of any complex criminal case, was that there wasn't enough immediate evidence at the scene to definitively determine which tragic situation they were truly dealing with. Forensic science, while profoundly powerful, requires time, specialized equipment, and meticulous analysis. Immediate conclusions drawn hastily from fragmented data are not only unprofessional, but dangerous to the pursuit of truth. So, as the ambulance rushed Brent's critically injured body to the emergency room, a race against time that tragically would not be won, the parallel machinery of justice began its relentless work on the victim's identity. They ran a records check in the hopes of learning more about their victim, understanding who Brent Tesner truly was, his background, his life, his connections, his aspirations, and most importantly, his conflicts, was absolutely paramount to deciphering the enigmatic circumstances of his death. So at this point in time, they start to really develop a picture of the victim in order to determine, who could have possibly done this to him. This holistic approach, often referred to in criminology as victimology, is foundational to any successful homicide investigation, providing critical context and invaluable direction in the labyrinthine search for motive and, ultimately, for the perpetrator. Each piece of information, however small, contributed to building a mosaic of the man whose life had been so violently and senselessly extinguished on a dark Cowpens road. Brent Tesner was born on January 14th, 1979, in Spartanburg, South Carolina. From an early age, it seemed, his destiny was intertwined with melody. He appeared to be intrinsically designed to become a musician, the rhythm and soul of music flowing through his very being, an innate passion evident even in his earliest years. The Tesner name itself resonated within the Cowpens community, carrying with it a certain social weight and recognition. Everybody knew the Tesners, a local fondly recalled, painting a picture of a family deeply woven into the fabric of the town's social life. We all just came to their house for all the music get-togethers, all the holidays. Everything was done involved around music. This vivid portrait of the Tesner household reveals not just a family that appreciated music, but one whose entire social existence revolved around it, making their home a vibrant, echoing hub of sound, laughter, and communal celebration. Brent, immersed from birth in this familial symphony, absorbed music not merely as an interest, but as an intrinsic part of his very identity. I've been playing all my life. I was raised in the music. The largest part, the majority, of Brent's life was the music. It was not merely a hobby. It was his passion, his calling, his language, his purpose, a relentless pursuit that defined him. The story of his musical genesis is recounted with a charming sense of a nascent prodigy. I bought a drum set at age for a remarkably young age, and about all he wanted to do was carry the drumsticks around, and everywhere he went and brought his hat and everything he could. This vivid, endearing imagery conjures a young Brent, consumed entirely by rhythm, a natural performer whose path was clearly marked and felt. He started moving up to singing, playing guitar, and things like that, his talents expanding as he matured. By his early teens, Brent had transcended mere familial entertainment. He was a regular on the local music circuit, a familiar and anticipated presence at any gathering where notes were played and voices were lifted. In song, his ambition was palpable. He seemed willing to do whatever it took to succeed, often making choices that, in hindsight, diverged sharply from conventional paths. Brent's educational trajectory provided an early glimpse into his independent spirit and his prioritization of passion over convention. Brent didn't finish school because he figured out the lifestyle of a teenager, and other things was more important to him at the time. This reveals a youthful impetuousness, a desire for immediate experience, and the siren call of his artistic path outweighing the structured demands of formal education, a choice not entirely uncommon for those swept up in creative pursuits. However, woven into that captivating lifestyle was a persistent challenge, a shadow that would follow him throughout his life, partying after his gigs. Brent did have some substance abuse issues. He drank alcohol. This candid admission from a love one reveals the underlying struggle, the persistent battle between his immense talent and his inherent vulnerabilities. I wish he'd just stayed in the church more than the bars. A wistful lament that spoke volumes about the constant spiritual tug-of-war within him, the competing influences vying for his soul. But that was a part of their life, reflecting a complex reality rather than a simplistic moral judgment, acknowledging the deeply ingrained nature of these habits within his social circle. Despite these emerging demons and the challenging choices he made, one of Brent's most unwavering and steadfast supporters was his high school sweetheart, Jennifer Bragg. Their youthful romance blossomed amidst the local music scene and the familiar rhythms of Calpins. Life. The young couple's lives were changed forever when Jennifer unexpectedly got pregnant while they were teens. This unforeseen event, often a crucible for young love, demanded immediate maturity and responsibility, forcing them to confront the stark realities of parenthood. He had his first daughter. The arrival of his first child, this tiny, dependent human being, marked a profound turning point for Brent, acting as a powerful catalyst for introspection and a deep spiritual reawakening. The first time he put eyes on that little girl, he dropped on his knees and said, "Lord, if she's following me, I need to follow you." This poignant moment, captured in the heartfelt words of his family, signifies a deep spiritual conversion, a desperate yearning for redemption, and a powerful commitment to responsible fatherhood. The birth of his daughter became the undeniable impetus, leading him to seek a path of purpose and meaning. In 1999, at the tender age of 20, Brent and Jennifer married, solidifying their commitment and beginning a new chapter together, promising a future of shared responsibility and faith. He decided to leave his partying behind and pursue his true calling, one of profound spiritual depth rather than fleeting nocturnal pleasure. He went to school to become a preacher. He got in church, changed his life around. This radical and sincere shift, from the intoxicating allure of smoky bars to the solemn, guiding call of the pulpit, speaks to a powerful desire for redemption, for self-betterment, and for a life rooted in faith. He told me when he was at church doing what he felt like he was called to do, he felt at peace. This heartfelt statement, imbued with a quiet longing, paints Brent as a man genuinely searching for internal tranquility, spiritual fulfillment, and a deeper meaning beyond the fleeting joys of the spotlight. Over the next several years, Brent and Jennifer welcomed 2 more children, further building a family that he clearly cherished and for whom he worked tirelessly to provide. He would work construction or whatever music gigs that was playing in town that would pay him that. He always provided for his family. This demonstrates Brent's inherent sense of responsibility, his unwavering willingness to do whatever was necessary to care for his loved ones, balancing his artistic soul and spiritual calling with the pragmatic, often difficult, demands of fatherhood. Him and Jennifer, you'd think it'd be, acceptable for the rest of their lives. This statement reflects a common human yearning for stability and permanence. But the devil has his ways of coming in and changing things like that. This poetic yet somber observation, deeply rooted in the cultural and spiritual context of the South. Hints at the insidious ways that past habits can reassert themselves, the fragility of human promises, and the constant battle between good and evil, challenging even the strongest resolves and threatening the carefully constructed peace. As much as Brent genuinely tried to focus on faith and family, the gravitational pull of the local nightlife, a potent, echoing remnant of his past, a siren song of familiar haunts, eventually proved too strong for him to consistently ignore. The allure of the stage, the camaraderie of the bars, the thrill of performance continued to exert a powerful, almost magnetic force. Him and Jennifer at the time was having some issues where her trying to keep you straight and him. Staying out late just pretty much took a toll. This portrays a common and tragically difficult dynamic in relationships where one partner earnestly attempts to guide the other toward sobriety and stability, urging them away from destructive habits, while the other grapples with persistent temptations and the insidious grip of addiction. The emotional strain of this constant, exhausting struggle eventually became too much to bear, fraying the bonds of their marriage. At 30, after a decade of marriage, Brent and Jennifer divorced. This formal dissolution marked a significant and heartbreaking turning point in Brent's life, a regression to older, less stable patterns of behavior he had worked so hard to shed. Following the divorce, Brent fully embraced his new bachelor status, perhaps with a sense of lost inhibition. When they split up, he went out, started partying. He just left for everything and went back to a wild side. The wild side he had previously sought to abandon, a manifestation of his unresolved demons, now reclaimed him with an almost predictable, if regrettable, pendulum swing of his behavior, a reversion to the very lifestyle that had brought him so much inner conflict. During this tumultuous period of renewed hedonism and rediscovered freedom, he also reconnected with a childhood friend named Angelita Wright. Their lives, having diverged for a time, now converged once more. She literally lived right beside us, and she'd go to church with all of us. She's always had a crush on Brent all the way growing up. The intertwined histories of small-town residents mean that lives are constantly crossing and recrossing, sometimes circling back with potent, unforeseen consequences. Angelita, it emerged, carried her own archetype within the Cowpens community. Angelita Wright was like those small-town girls who would never leave home. This observation painted a picture of someone intrinsically tied to the local rhythms and social circles, perhaps resistant to change or the world beyond. It was easy for her to fit into that lifestyle with Brent and become inseparable because if there was a party, if there was a gig, she was there and supportive of him. This mutual embrace of a shared, carefree, and often tumultuous lifestyle formed the natural, almost inevitable foundation of their renewed connection, creating an environment where their destructive habits could reinforce each other. I honestly thought they'll run the roads for a little while, and then he'll go back home. This sentiment from an observer reveals a common perception that their renewed connection was merely a fleeting indulgence, a temporary detour for Brent. But within a year or two, they was married. What seemed like a temporary dalliance, a casual reconnecting, transformed into another marital commitment, perhaps spurred by shared history, a comfortable familiarity, and a deceptive allure of shared vulnerability. Angelita and Brent, united once more, had 3 more children together, further expanding his already considerable family and binding their lives in additional profound ways. But after 5 years of marriage, the second union, like the first, began to fray, and they decided to separate. The cycle of Brent's life, oscillating with weary predictability between periods of marital commitment and the siren call of indulgent nightlife, between attempts at sobriety and succumbing to temptation, continued its relentless rotation. The reason for their separation, according to one frank observation, lay in their different approaches to their lifestyle choices. To be honest with you, he tried his best to straighten up, but she wouldn't calm down. This statement, imbued with a tangible sense of frustration and disappointment, suggests a dynamic where one partner was genuinely attempting to break free from self-destructive habits to stabilize for the sake of his family, while the other remained stubbornly entrenched, unwilling or unable to alter her course, thereby creating an intractable and ultimately irreparable chasm between them. Despite the deeply felt rifts and the impending legal separation, a fragile common ground was, for a time, maintained. They were able to co-parent and be there for their children that they had together. This arrangement, born out of necessity, a shared love for their offspring, and perhaps a superficial civility, presented an outward appearance of amicable co-parenting, a deceptive veneer that would later prove to be deeply misleading and ultimately shatter. By 2015, Brent was a 36-year-old divorced father of 6, a complex and challenging role, with a second divorce from Angelita in the works. The formal, legal machinery of permanently separating their lives was slowly and inexorably grinding forward, adding yet another layer of tension and unresolved conflict to their already intricate and volatile relationship. Despite these deeply personal and legal challenges, he was still playing music, that eternal wellspring of his identity, but he'd managed to find a more delicate, hard-won balance between pursuing his artistic dreams and meeting his fundamental responsibilities. As a provider for his large family, this fragile balance suggested a glimmer of renewed stability, a quiet sense of hard-won peace after years of personal turmoil and often chaotic choices. He bought a house in Cowpains. It was cute and really simple. So he took me and my little siblings there and told us that everything was going to be okay and that we'll have a life there. This intensely emotional detail, recounted from the perspective of one of his children, paints a poignant picture of Brent as a devoted father attempting to build a secure, stable future for his offspring, offering them the very stability and certainty that he himself had often struggled so profoundly to maintain in his own life. The portrait of Brent in late 2015, therefore, was one of a man genuinely striving for self-improvement and purpose. He was doing good. He bought him a house. He got a full-time job at the concrete company. He was posting his music. He's wrote a lot of songs. He was supposed to want a divorce in February. This snapshot of his life, filled with tangible efforts toward betterment, a home, stable employment, creative output, and a clear path toward a more stable personal life, reveals a man who, despite his tumultuous past, was truly and earnestly striving for betterment, for a purposeful and grounded existence, both personally and professionally. He was a man with clear plans, with nascent aspirations, moving resolutely toward a future that held tangible promise and genuine hope. But any aspirations Brent had, any glimmer of a peaceful, stable future, were now in profound jeopardy, shattered into a million pieces as he's rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The urgency of the medical response was palpable, a desperate race against time. They tried to perform some life-saving measures on him, medical professionals battling against the inexorable tide of trauma. But ultimately, he doesn't have died around 3 o'clock in the morning. The medical report, grim in its precision and utterly definitive in its conclusion, unequivocally confirmed the worst fears of the first responders and investigators. They determined that with his injuries, the internal bleeding to his organs, that it was consistent with him being hit and run over. This definitive medical finding was not open to interpretation. It shifted the investigative focus entirely and irrevocably. The possibility of an accident, a tragic error, was extinguished, replaced by a darker, more intentional reality. At that point, it was considered a potential homicide. The very term potential homicide immediately raised the stakes, moving the incident from a tragic accident to a deliberate, malicious act. The search for a culprit had now become an all-consuming quest for justice. Investigators, following deeply established procedure and driven by the solemn responsibility of their profession, contact Brent's next of kin to deliver the tragic, devastating news and, in the same breath, try to gather some crucial answers. recognizing that the immediate emotional reactions of loved ones can often provide unfiltered, vital information. The bearer of such news faces a profoundly difficult and somber task. The investigators called Angelita, Wright, and asked if Angelita was related to Brent Tesnier. Angelita states that, yes, that she's related to him, that she's his wife, and asks, "Oh my gosh, is he okay?" Her initial reaction, professing concern and confusion, appeared on the surface to be typical of someone receiving shocking and grievous news about a spouse, estranged or not. The investigator, with heavy heart, comes out and states that Brent had been killed. Her reaction was instantaneous and dramatic. She just loses it, extremely upset. This portrayal suggested a profound emotional breakdown, consistent with the immediate, overwhelming grief and shock one would naturally expect from a spouse, despite their estranged status. In addition to her emotional display, Angelita provided an initial, critical piece of information. Angelita said she had not seen him that entire day. This statement, a crucial initial alibi for her whereabouts, was duly noted by the investigators. Log is a potentially vital piece of their unfolding puzzle. At this early juncture, with Brent's life extinguished under such brutally violent and deeply mysterious circumstances, the detectives found themselves facing a challenging and frustrating predicament. It leaves investigators with no suspects and very little to determine whether this was an accident or intentional. The crucial distinction between a negligent accident and a deliberate act of murder remained, tantalizingly out of reach, obscured by the scarcity of immediate, unequivocal evidence to classify the act. No leads, no evidence, just a body, and now trying to piece together what really happened. This stark, honest assessment underscored the arduous and often disheartening task of early stage investigations, a painstaking process of sifting through fragmented information, trusting gut feelings, and attempting to penetrate the often unreliable currents of human memory to painstakingly reconstruct the truth from the debris of tragedy. The quest for justice had just begun, and its winding, uncertain path was, for the moment, still profoundly shrouded in confusion and ambiguity. Coming up, the narrative hints, signaling an imminent turning point in the relentless pursuit of justice. A crucial tip jumpstarts the investigation, injecting a fresh, potent wave of direction into the swirling confusion that had enveloped Brent Tesner's death. A specific, alarming image is conjured. They show up at the house with a pipe or some kind of blunt force object, and they're looking for Brent. This stark and menacing visual immediately suggested a clear, violent intent and a direct, aggressive confrontation, firmly shifting the understanding of the case away from the realm of mere vehicular accident and into the darker territory of premeditated assault. And then detectives uncover a powerful motive. The revelation promised a deeper psychological understanding of the crime. It was revenge porn. I mean, that's what it is. This is a psychologically explosive disclosure, offering a chilling glimpse into the raw, destructive human emotions that, when pushed to their breaking point, can drive individuals to commit acts of unthinkable horror. The casual, almost dismissive phrase, "that's what it is," belies the profound depravity of the act and its devastating impact on a person's dignity and social standing. In the profound silence of the early morning hours of December 27th, 2015, as the sun slowly and tentatively began to paint the pre-dawn skies over Cowpens, the grim and shocking news of Brent Tesner's death spread like wildfire among his family and friends, its rapid propagation a testament to the close-knit nature of the small community. Such tragic tidings travel with the speed of sound in tightly woven social circles, creating an ever-widening ripple of disbelief, profound grief, and desperate confusion that quickly expanded to encompass everyone touched by the victim's vibrant, if complicated, life. One poignant recollection perfectly captured the shattering impact of this sudden, violent loss. I woke up to a text message in capital letters that said, "Brent's dead." So I just, there's no way. I just talked to him the night before. This raw, personal testimony conveys the initial, visceral denial that often acts as a psychological buffer against unbearable truths. The mind's desperate attempt to ward off the agonizing reality. It was just like a feeling that I'll never forget. He's gone. My body went numb. I went blank. The unvarnished honesty of this emotional recounting underscores a profound and paralyzing trauma experienced by those left behind, an existential shock that momentarily seizes both the mind and the physical form. The following day, amidst the burgeoning communal sorrow and mounting desperation for answers, detectives received a crucial tip that, like a lifeline, provided their first clear and actionable lead in the labyrinthine case. This is frequently how a murder investigation, mired in the initial fog of the unknown and seemingly insurmountable obstacles, begins to gain vital traction. 911 receives a call from a friend of Brent's. This anonymous or semi-anonymous caller, often motivated by loyalty to the victim, a burgeoning sense of civic duty, or perhaps a deep-seated fear, provides a crucial directional nudge, diverting the investigation onto a promising new trajectory. He believed the hit and run was a result of a feud with two men known as the Evans brothers. The initial, whispered suspicions that had circulated among Brent's family and friends were now being independently corroborated by an external source, an unexpected validation that instantly elevated the brothers from mere local gossip to legitimate and compelling persons of interest in a homicide inquiry. The caller, recognizing the importance of familial insight, suggests police get in touch with Brent's brother, Lucas Tesnier, for more specific and detailed information. Lucas, as a close relative deeply embedded in Brent's life and his various social connections, would likely possess a more intimate knowledge of Brent's recent conflicts, associates, and underlying tensions. Lucas, responsive to police's urgent request, provided a statement that vividly painted a picture of sharply escalating tension and overt aggression just prior to Brent's death. He recounted that the day before, maybe December 25th, barely 2 days before the tragic event, the Evans brothers show up at the house with a pipe or some kind of blunt force object, and they're looking for Brent. This stark account immediately confirmed a physical confrontation and clearly conveyed a menacing, violent intent, providing a tangible threat that directly preceded Brent's death. The choice of weapon, a pipe or similar blunt instrument, was significant, suggesting a readiness and willingness to inflict serious physical harm. The underlying motive for this overt aggression, Lucas explained, centered around a familiar and deeply aggravating bone of contention: stolen property. The Evans brothers thought that Brent had stolen their cell phone, and they clearly wanted it back. The perceived triviality of the item, a cell phone, stands in stark, unsettling contrast to the extreme and rapidly escalating violence of their reaction. A common psychological thread in human conflicts where perceived disrespect, betrayal, or violation can quickly overshadow the actual material value of the object in question. Brent, he would go down there, and they would hang out and play music, and then the cell phone supposedly got missing. This description details a social familiarity, an existing relationship between Brent and the Evans brothers, implying a level of trust that, when broken by the alleged theft, made the personal affront even more acute and infuriating, adding another layer of personal entanglement. The lady that Brent supposedly stole the cell phone from is now married to an Evans, further intertwining their lives and profoundly intensifying the personal nature of perceived transgression. Brent wasn't home at the exact moment of this aggressive and hostile visit, but Lucas's account continued to paint a vivid picture of the brothers' unrelenting rage. Lucas says the Evans brothers continued to bang on the doors and windows, refusing to be deterred. Their aggression unchecked by Brent's absence. There was an altercation there where they had tried to break in. This escalating aggression, from seeking him out to violently banging on the house, to attempting forced entry, signified a potent and dangerous mixture of unbridled anger and desperate intent on the part of the brothers. Lucas, finding himself caught in the middle of this volatile situation, bravely attempted to de-escalate. Lucas has to kind of calm the situation down, a brave but perilous undertaking. They kind of come at him very aggressively, illustrating the direct threat he faced. In response to this aggression, Lucas instinctively goes back inside the house to get something to fend them off, a natural defensive reaction to protect himself and his property. By the time he comes out, the individuals are in a car storming off, their retreat sudden and aggressive. Crucially, Lucas was able to identify that car, and that car is a larger SUV. This detail, regarding the specific type of vehicle involved, immediately resonated with the initial hazy crime scene observations, providing a powerful piece of circumstantial evidence. At this point, the investigative landscape began to sharpen considerably, moving from scattered fragments to a more coherent, albeit still preliminary, narrative. We have Brent with some kind of blunt force injury, with someone in an SUV that is probably big, enough to cause that damage, and most importantly, motive. The seemingly disparate pieces of a compelling theory were now, for the first time, starting to fall into an unsettling place. The alleged theft, the aggressive confrontation, the specific type of vehicle, all combined to make the Evans brothers strong and undeniable initial suspects. When detectives, as part of their comprehensive due diligence, checked Brent's criminal history, they discovered he's been busted for a burglary and assault in the past. This information, while not directly incriminating for the current murder investigation, provided crucial context about Brent's background, hinting at a life where confrontation and rule-bending were not entirely unknown territory. It also, regrettably, lent a certain superficial plausibility to the Evans brothers' accusation of theft, however unjustifiable their subsequent violent reaction. From a criminal psychology perspective, while killing someone over a stolen cell phone seems extreme, the analyst notes with certain grim familiarity the human propensity for disproportionate rage, especially when compounded by perceived disrespect, a violation of personal property, or a breach of trust within certain subcultures or tight-knit social circles, should never be underestimated. Such perceived transgressions can often ignite a wildfire of vengeance, far exceeding the material value of the item itself. Detectives wisely recognized that there could be more to this tip than they initially thought. The layers of the human psyche, especially when inflamed by perceived injustice, often conceal deeper, more complex motivations that can spiral into deadly acts. Before detectives could fully pursue this burgeoning lead, which, until then, had seemed the most promising avenue for justice, another unexpected and crucially distracting event diverted their immediate attention and resources. They received a call from one of Brent's neighbors. She's seeing somebody attempt to break into Brent's home. The sanctity of a crime scene, even after its initial processing, often proves to be an irresistible magnet for curious parties, or, more tellingly, for those with various vested interests in its contents. Law enforcement responded with characteristic urgency, and who they found at the scene was Angelita Wright, Brent's wife, along with a friend of hers, Amy Paget. The presence of Angelita, especially in light of the official homicide investigation and her earlier claims of separation and amicable co-parenting with Brent, immediately raised a red flag for the astute officers. Amy Paget, her companion, explained that after learning that Brent was gone, Angelita wanted to go to Brent's home to retrieve some of her items, retrieve a cell phone, some potential Christmas gifts. Her purported reasons, presented on the surface, seemed innocuous enough, even understandable, given their separated status and shared children. However, detectives, acutely aware of the absolute sanctity and sensitivity of an active crime scene, had strict protocols to follow to maintain the integrity of their investigation. Detectives unequivocally stated that the investigation is active and that no one can enter the home. At that time, They're not going to allow her to go in there and potentially take something that could be of evidentiary value. This judicious and swift decision, driven by their unwavering commitment to forensic accuracy, effectively prevented the contamination or potential removal of what could have been vital, game-changing evidence, thereby upholding the integrity of the nascent murder inquiry. During this chance encounter at the scene, the observant detective sees the unexpected opportunity to engage further with Angelita, aiming to glean additional insight into Brent's intricate life and, crucially, her complex relationship with him, seeking to confirm or refute earlier statements. They started asking her a little bit about her relationship with Brent at that time, probing gently, and that's when she tells them that she's separated from him. This reiterated her previous statement, which, on its own, seemed consistent with known facts and public perception. She went on to provide further detail. She lets them know that, look, even though we're raising our kids together and we're amicable, we haven't seen each other in a while. This carefully constructed narrative of an amicable separation, a publicly palatable story of respectful co-parenting despite their differences, was now firmly established in her narrative to the police. Then, and most importantly, she independently offered information about the Evans brothers, inadvertently or perhaps deliberately strengthening that earlier lead. She says that Evans brothers, we're looking for them to have some kind of beef. She says if anyone could have done or would have done anything to Brent, it would be them, because she knew the history and the animosity that was between them. This striking second confirmation of the physical confrontation between the Evans brothers and Brent, this time from an independent source, and the victim's own estranged wife no less, made the initial lead seem even more robust, adding significant weight to the narrative. This is the second confirmation of this confrontation between the Evans brothers and Brent. So now police have to go figure out where they were and what they were doing at the time of Brent's death. The combined weight of suspicion at this point rested heavily and convincingly on the Evans brothers, compelling law enforcement to act on this seemingly solid lead. In a town as small and interconnected as Cowpens, where relationships are often intricate, multi-layered, and personal histories are publicly known and shared knowledge, the Evans brothers weren't hard to find. Their reputations, their current whereabouts, their very lives were deeply woven into the rich and complex tapestry of the community fabric. Detectives, driven by the urgency of a homicide investigation, stopped by their house to directly see what they had to say about the alleged feud and, more critically, to verify their alibis. The investigative path, at this juncture, was clear, direct, and seemingly straightforward. Crucially, during this visit, police see that champagne-colored SUV that was mentioned in Lucas Tesner's earlier statement, and they don't see any damage on their SUV. This visual inspection, a quick yet vitally important initial check for physical evidence, failed to corroborate the vehicle damage expected from a violent hit-and-run, introducing the first significant crack in the otherwise compelling theory implicating the brothers. The Evans brothers, faced with direct questioning about the unfolding tragedy, were surprisingly forthcoming with information about their long-standing feud with Brent. They readily admitted their animosity. They let police know that they were looking for him and that they were trying to find his cell. Phone that they say was stolen. Their narrative of the dispute, consistent with Lucas's account, reinforced the veracity of that part of the tip. However, when pressed for their precise whereabouts at the critical time of Brent's death, their narrative dramatically shifted away from the realm of suspicion. The brothers claimed they had no intention of killing Brent and were out of town when the hit and run took place, and, crucially, their alibi was not only clear, but also easily verifiable. It was reported that these two guys were at a funeral that was nowhere near where Brent died, being able to quickly confirm that they did have an alibi for the night of the 26th and the morning of the 27th. Through independent corroboration, they were able to clear them. This rapid verification is a hallmark of efficient diligent police work, effectively eliminating two prominent suspects and thereby narrowing the field of inquiry, returning focus to the unknown, while the existence of the feud and the aggressive, menacing encounter were undeniable historical facts. Their independently verified alibi provided them with a verifiable absence from the immediate scene of the crime at the crucial time of Brent's death. At this point, law enforcement needed to find a new direction for this investigation to go. The initial compelling lead, which had drawn so much attention and suspicion, had effectively dissolved, leaving detectives back at a crossroads, compelled to critically reevaluate every prior assumption and bravely venture into new, uncharted territories of inquiry, in hopes of garnering fresh information and, more critically, keeping public awareness of Brent Tesner's unsolved murder high. His grieving family courageously turned to the local media for help. The media, often seen as a powerful conduit between the anguished public and the relentless police force, possesses a unique ability to apply crucial public pressure, generate vital public interest, and, in some cases, solicit indispensable tips from witnesses who might otherwise remain silent. Angelita, Brent's estranged wife, a central figure now swirling with a complex array of suspicions and public sympathy, met a crew from our station at the scene of where Brent died with some of his family members. Her appearance alongside other grieving family members might have initially seemed a testament to shared sorrow and collective solidarity in the face of tragedy. Her public pronouncements echoed the family's collective cry for justice. It was an innocent man's life that got taken. Whether it be a hit and run or whether somebody hurt him, answers still need to be served. On the surface, she presented as a grieving widow, a poignant voice expressing the community's collective anguish and demand for truth. However, for one astute and observant individual present at this media interaction, someone keenly attuned to the subtle currents of human behavior, something felt intrinsically and profoundly off: the human ability to instinctively read nonverbal cues, to detect incongruity between spoken words and unspoken truths, is a powerful and often undeniable tool. I was there, this observer recalled, and we all kind of just stood together, but she did all the talking. And I was like, something's off about her. This initial gut feeling, this subtle tremor of unease, often serves as a prescient precursor to deeper, more unsettling revelations, highlighting the psychological principle that nonverbal cues can reveal far more than carefully chosen words. The observer's next remarks were particularly damning. She didn't have many tears. She was dry. She's standing right there where her husband and where the father of her kids had just been run over, showing no emotion. Her demeanor didn't really match up with, the emotions that she should be having. It was pretty bizarre. This profound and palpable dispassion, this lack of visible grief in such a devastating context, stood in stark, jarring contrast to the expected emotional displays typically observed in similar situations. From a criminal psychology perspective, such a profound disconnect between expected emotional display and actual behavior, while not on its own conclusive proof of guilt, serves as a significant and undeniable red flag, raising serious questions about the authenticity of her sorrow. This perceived emotional inconsistency was further underscored by comparing it to her earlier, private display of grief. It's much different from the extreme emotion she'd shown when talking with police just hours earlier. This critical discrepancy between her private emotional outburst and her public stoicism added another intricate layer to the rapidly emerging suspicions surrounding Angelita, deepening the investigative mystery. The intuition of the observer, keenly honed by human interaction, had crystallized into a definite and unsettling suspicion. Angelina very much looked like she was hiding something. Less than 48 hours after Brent Tesner's tragic death in a potential hit-and-run murder, as local news widely covered the family's police for help, extending their appeal into the community's living rooms, a pivotal breakthrough emerged. Brent's neighbor, Sherry, saw the broadcast and immediately picked up the phone. Sherry was familiar with Brent and with Angelina since she lived close by and knew them well. Neighbors often hold a unique and invaluable perspective into domestic dynamics, privy to the intimate sounds, muffled arguments, comings and goings, and countless small observations that formal visitors or casual acquaintances might completely miss. Sherry's call proved to be an undeniably pivotal moment in the investigation, injecting fresh, raw insight into the hidden dynamics of Brent and Angelina's relationship. Sherry lets police know that Angelina does have a reason to be mad at Brent, and she was mad enough to potentially have done this. This was a bombshell revelation, shattering Angelina's carefully constructed narrative of amicable separation and shared grief. Angelina had provided information to law enforcement that she and Brent were still amicable with one. Another, a comforting but ultimately false narrative. What law enforcement starts to find out is that that is the exact opposite. The carefully maintained facade was now irrevocably crumbling, revealing a far more contentious and volatile reality beneath its surface. Both of them had their problems, and their marriage was very volatile. This stark admission painted a picture of a relationship rife with conflict, tension, and potentially explosive anger. A profound contrast to Angelina's earlier assurances of respectful civility. According to Sherry, the long-standing arguments between the couple had been dangerously escalating, intensifying into overt acts of revenge, culminating in a particularly egregious act by Brent that had pushed Angelina beyond all reason. Brent, Sherry alleged, had stepped over the line. Stepped over the line is a powerful phrase, suggesting a boundary violently transgressed, an act so profoundly offensive, so utterly violating, that it could potentially trigger an extreme, desperate, and even homicidal response. Sherry vividly tells police that she went to the house on the 26th to borrow something from Brent, and he shows her that he had posted some explicit pictures of a woman, and he had tagged Angelina in those pictures on Facebook. The detail of the social media tag was critical, whether they were Angelina or not. He was trying to insinuate that it was her or send some kind of message to her. This revelation was the true fulcrum of Angelina's motive, and a profound example of modern psychological torment and public humiliation. The deliberate act of public shaming, amplified exponentially by the pervasive and indelible reach of social media in a small community, is an incredibly potent act of aggression, a deliberate attempt to degrade, control, and utterly destroy another person's reputation. It was revenge porn. I mean, that's what it is. This is a chilling, unequivocal statement identifying a modern and insidious form of abuse, explicitly designed to degrade, control, and publicly shame, and demonstrably capable of provoking immense rage, a profound sense of violation, and an insatiable thirst for retribution. For Angelina, in a small town like Cowpens, where social reputation and dignity were paramount, this act would have been utterly devastating, an intolerable and indelible public humiliation, a wound that festered with a venomous fury. Not only did Sherry vividly recall seeing that Facebook post itself, but Brent, acutely aware of Angelina's furious reaction, had also shown Sherry several highly incriminating text messages that Angelina had sent him immediately after that abhorrent post was made. The digital footprint of their escalating animosity, the irrefutable, time-stamped evidence of progressively violent threats, was now available to investigators, confirming the ferocity of Angelina's emotional state. In these texts, Angelina, consumed by rage, is telling Brent, you better take this down. Take it down now, or I'm going to come over to Cowpens, and I'm going to kill you. This was no longer a matter of mere anger or idle threats born of temporary frustration. This was an explicit, unambiguous death threat, spoken in the white-hot heat of passion and public humiliation, but chillingly preserved for posterity in the cold, unfeeling permanence of digital communication. Sherry, knowing both individuals well, honestly admitted, Sherry didn't really ever see Angelina as being a super violent person. But with the overwhelming information that she had, she decided she needed to at least provide law enforcement with the information. This statement speaks volumes about the community's reluctance to believe the worst of one of their own, to categorize a familiar face as a potential murderer, but also to the immense power of credible, first-hand information to compel moral action, even against personal inclination. The immense weight of this new evidence, particularly the direct, irrefutable threats and the explosive motive of public humiliation, dramatically and irrevocably shifted the investigative focus, now pointing an undeniable finger directly at Angelita as the prime suspect. After Brent's family had been given a brief, compassionate space and sufficient time to grieve the immediate, overwhelming shock and profound loss of their loved one, investigators, driven by the urgency of solving a murder, meticulously turned to them for deeper, more nuanced insight into the intricate and often tempestuous dynamics that define the relationship between Brent and Angelita. Families, through their intimate and deeply personal knowledge of complex relationships, frequently provide crucial details and emotional nuances that formal records and superficial observations cannot possibly capture. From these heartfelt conversations, a clearer, more complete picture of Angelita's background began to emerge. We learned that Angelina's background was kind of tumultuous. Her mom was murdered, and then her dad went to prison, so she was raised by her grandparents. This tragic, deeply traumatic backstory provided a crucial psychological lens through which to begin to understand Angelita's often erratic behavior. A childhood marked by such profound and devastating loss, the murder of a mother, the incarceration of father, often leaves deep and lasting psychological scars, leading to severe attachment issues, unresolved trauma, and, frequently, the development of self-destructive coping mechanisms, which can manifest in a myriad of ways. Despite these deeply ingrained early adversities, her grandparents, acting as a crucial safety net, try to give her the best life that they could, providing a foundation of love and stability, yet unable to completely undo the damage of her early experiences. Despite these loving efforts, she eventually kind of fell into some of those same substance abuse issues that Brent had. This shared vulnerability, this commonality of struggle and addiction, ironically, initially formed a powerful and compelling bond between them, a dangerous kinship forged in shared experience. When Brent, after his first divorce, came back into Angelita's life, their deeply shared experiences of personal struggle, addiction, and often tumultuous emotional turmoil forged a powerful and immediate bond between them, making their connection stronger. She was a shoulder to crown, and he leaned on her for support. They were both partiers that I think there became a point in time in Brent's life when he really wanted to better himself for his kids. This critical insight coming from his family marks a crucial and ultimately tragic divergence in their individual paths. Brent's yearning for redemption, powerfully driven by his responsibilities as a father to his 6 children, stood in stark contrast to Angelita's continued, unyielding immersion in the party lifestyle. Brent's family says that this growing disparity in their life choices was the beginning of the end. For the relationship, he realized he needed profound change. Kids started making steps and trying to get his life together. In a desperate and heartfelt plea for a shared, stable future, away from the destructive influences that plagued their lives, he made an ultimatum. He gave her a choice. He told her, "Look, I bought us a house. Let's get away from everybody and let's raise our kids." This was a clear, unambiguous olive branch, an earnest attempt to build a life founded on sobriety and stability. But, heartbreakingly, she refused to change, and then she would not stop partying. So he was like, "I'll do it by myself." This decisive break underscores Brent's unwavering commitment to personal change and familial responsibility, even if it meant forging that difficult path alone, leaving Angelita behind. His efforts extended beyond just leaving the party scene. He was fighting for custody of the kids, a legal battle for custody that she was losing, which she didn't want. His family elaborated, because she might pop in, take a picture, "Oh, I love you guys," and then back out the door she went, and it might be a week or two before you've seen her again. This paints a devastating picture of Angelita as an inconsistent, often absent mother, whose sporadic appearances were more for show than genuine, sustained commitment, an agonizing dynamic in a custody dispute. So he was like, I'm not going to let my kids grow up like this. Brent's resolve was now firm. He intended to protect his children from the cycle of instability and substance abuse that had so profoundly marked their lives and his own. Angelita's reaction to Brent's resolute decision to pursue a stable, sober life for his children and his eventual formal filing for divorce was, predictably, explosively furious, fueled by a potent mix of rejection and public humiliation. She was mad. She was very furious because Brent told her it was over. He's been filed for divorce. This finality, the unequivocal end of their relationship, sparked a visceral, unmanageable rage within her. She said that was going to happen, hinting at previous, perhaps unheeded, warnings. She threatened him several times, her words escalating in menace, and he just brushed it off. The tragic irony here is palpable and devastating. Brent, having grown accustomed to her dramatic outbursts and empty threats over the years, tragically failed to recognize the critical point at which her spiraling rage would transcend mere rhetoric and transform into deadly, undeniable reality. This fatal misjudgment, born of long familiarity with her patterns, cost him his life. The family, understanding the depth of her fury, unequivocally informed detectives that Brent's inflammatory Facebook post, the public shaming, only made things exponentially worse, adding a final, unforgivable insult to the already raw wound's rejection. A direct, chilling account from a family member provided concrete evidence of the intensity of Angelita's fury. Shortly before Brent's murder, directly contradicting her earlier statements of amicability. So the night before Brent was killed, she pulls up, her presence a storm on the horizon, and she was like, "Get in touch with Brent. He posted pictures of me on Facebook, and I want to take them down right now." I was like, well, maybe you need to go home and cool off. A futile attempt to defuse the gathering storm. This attempted intervention reveals the raw, uncontrolled nature of Angelita's anger, a tempest brewing violently beneath the surface, amplified exponentially by the public humiliation of the revenge porn, pushing her to the brink. This account from a trusted source stood in stark and damning contrast to what they'd previously heard from Angelita herself. It was the polar opposite of what they'd heard from Angelita. Not only are they having to look at the lies that Angelita is providing, fabricating a narrative of calm civility, then they're also provided with this sort of motive with that Facebook post, a truly explosive, irrefutable motive for extreme violence. Detectives, drawing upon their wealth of experience and understanding human depravity, do believe that revenge porn is powerful motive, as it targets deeply held concepts of personal dignity, reputation, and social standing, capable of triggering an uncontrollable, destructive rage in a targeted individual. However, a significant logistical question still loomed. But they're trying to piece together the facts because Angelita doesn't have a car. So who could have helped her? This undeniable logistical gap, the absence of a personal vehicle for Angelita, immediately and unequivocally pointed to the crucial necessity of a co-conspirator, a vital missing piece in the rapidly emerging, darker picture of murder. Detectives, through their tireless efforts and reliance on community intelligence, did not have to look very far for this potential co-conspirator. The missing piece in their chilling puzzle, word on the street, that invaluable informal network of information that thrives and pulses beneath the surface of small towns, quickly provided them a name, Brandon Blackwood. Brandon, too, was from the same small town, deeply ingrained in its social fabric. He grew up there, grew up with his grandparents, had a grandparent that was in law enforcement, and it was a pretty big deal. so people knew who he was. Brandon, much like Angelita and Brent, was a familiar figure in Cowpens, known not only through his own life, but through the respected history of his family within the community. This social proximity meant that his potential involvement, if true, would be another devastating blow to the town's already fractured sense of security. The intelligence about Brandon quickly materialized into concrete evidence. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Angelita with Brandon on the night of Brent's death, providing concrete temporal and associational evidence that firmly linked the two individuals. Crucially, the means of their transportation was also identified. The way that they're getting around is in Brandon Blackwood's white truck. The mention of the specific vehicle, its color, its owner, was a critical, tangible detail that aligned perfectly with the early, hazy observations at the crime scene. A white truck involved in a hit and run. Driven by this crucial information, when they go to Brandon's grandparents' house to locate Brandon and kind of talk to him about what happened that day, his white truck's in front of the house, offering an immediate opportunity for a critical inspection. Law enforcement arriving, took the opportunity to do a little loop around that truck and see if there's any damage or anything. This seemingly casual inspection, a routine yet highly tactical maneuver for seasoned officers, proved instantly fruitful and devastatingly effective. What they see is some front bumper damage. This damage, visibly evident on the vehicle belonging to the person reportedly seen with the vengeful Angelita, immediately connected to the violent impact of the hit and run, no longer merely circumstantial, but becoming intensely direct evidence. Further inspection yielded even more disturbing presumptive evidence. They see a smear on the front bumper that looks like it could be blood, and they also see what ultimately looks as some hair wrapped around a bolt at the front of the car. These gruesome findings were far more than mere scratches or incidental road damage. They were visceral, undeniable indicators of a direct impact with a human body, powerful presumptive evidence of a violent collision. The dreadful realization then dawned with stark clarity. They start to think that this vehicle is actually the murder weapon. The transformation of a common mode of transport into an instrument of death is always a chilling and sobering realization for investigators, providing a concrete, undeniable link between malicious intent and its brutal execution. Coming up, the narrative tightens, focusing on the imminent unraveling of a dark secret, intensified by the promise of a direct, first-hand account. An eyewitness gives a harrowing confession. The weight of his words hangs heavy in the air, hinting at details that will expose the raw brutality of the crime. He says she turns on the brights, realizes that it's Brent Test near, and she floors it. This statement is so visceral, so chillingly specific, that it promises to provide the climactic, horrifying truth to the preliminary stages of the investigation. A cold-blooded act witness from a passenger seat. But is he telling the truth? This critical question of witness credibility, always paramount in criminal investigations, resurfaces immediately and urgently. The very next statement, a self-serving disclaimer offered by the witness himself, immediately injects doubt and forces the prosecution to consider profound potential fragility of their primary witness's testimony. When I get intensely pressured, I say whatever I need to say. This revelation, born of human frailty under duress, instantly complicates the pursuit of justice, highlighting the delicate balance between testimonial reliability and the overwhelming human desire to escape immediate discomfort. 2 days into the intense, relentless investigation of Brent Tessner's murder, the accumulating physical and testimonial evidence had shifted dramatically, now centering almost entirely around Brandon Blackwood's truck, the very vehicle suspected of being the murder weapon. Investigators impounded Brandon Blackwood's truck and sent blood samples for testing, meticulously following forensic protocol. This painstaking collection and analysis of potential DNA and trace evidence is paramount to substantiating eyewitness accounts with objective, irrefutable scientific data. Now, police had a lot of things that they can directly question Brandon about. The questions for him were manifold, deeply probing and immensely incriminating. Who is driving the truck was a foundational query seeking to establish responsibility. Why is this damage here? Pointed to the specific evidence on the vehicle. Did you hit Brent? Was a direct, accusatory question he had to face. Brandon, faced with the overwhelming and burgeoning evidence connecting him and his vehicle to the crime, had no option but to comply. He goes down to the Spartanburg Sheriff's Office to give them a statement. The solemn, official atmosphere of the Sheriff's Office, far removed from the familiar streets of Cowpens, undoubtedly adding to the immense psychological pressure he already faced. What do you mean? A detective might ask, signaling the beginning of a relentless cross-examination. The detectives, employing strategic interrogation techniques designed to gradually build rapport and extract comprehensive information, started by having Brandon tell them how he came to be involved with Brent's wife, Angelita. Understanding the precise nature and depth of their relationship was a key piece in comprehending the events of that fateful night, exploring any potential pre-existing dynamics or influences. There was quite an age difference between him. I think she was 27, 28, and I think he was 19 or 20. This noticeable age gap might suggest a dynamic of influence or a certain imbalance within their relationship, or perhaps simply a common social bond within a small community where such distinctions often blur. Brandon initially described his relationship with Angelita as just being friends, claiming that they hang out together, that they occasionally party together. This portrayal, while seemingly innocuous on the surface, subtly hinted at a shared lifestyle, a mutual immersion in habits that unfortunately aligned with both Brent's and Angelita's past, substance abuse issues, and turbulent behaviors. When asked directly about the harrowing night of Brent's murder, Brandon, amidst his nervousness, confirmed a crucial detail, that he and Angelita were together. This provided a critical corroboration of the eyewitness reports that had placed them together in the white truck, thereby solidifying their presence at relevant times. His narrative then plunged into the darker aspects of their shared evening, revealing a potent cocktail of substance abuse and escalating emotional volatility. He basically describes him and Angelita drinking all day and possibly doing some drugs. This detail provides essential and deeply disturbing context. The judgment of both individuals was severely impaired by substances, a dangerous combination that could dramatically heighten emotional responses, dull inhibitions, and lead to disastrous decisions. Their chaotic evening led them to a crucial moment. They make a stop to see one of their friends, and that's when Carol shows them the post that was on Brent's Facebook page, the infamous revenge porn. And of course she tells them that she's angry that these explicit pictures are online. This, according to Brandon, was a precise moment when Angelita's already simmering rage truly ignited, fueled by the corrosive effects of alcohol and drugs and the immediate, undeniable evidence of her profound public humiliation. Angelita's immediate reaction to seeing the explicit pictures online, as recounted by Brandon, was explosive and unequivocally verbal. Angelita starts making statements like, "I'm going to kill him. He doesn't deserve the air he breathes." This terrifyingly explicit verbalization perfectly reiterated the exact death threats previously, overheard and reported by Sherry, painting a consistent and alarming picture of a mind consumed by violent animosity and a profound thirst for retribution. Brandon's consistent account solidified the motive beyond mere suspicion, providing direct, first-hand evidence of Angelita's lethal intent. Their evening of escalating anger and intoxication continued its downward spiral. He says they end up going to several other houses where, the anger towards Brent continues. They continue to drink. She starts telling people how she's going to go over there to cow pens and, set them straight. This describes a clear psychological progression. An unhinged ascent where the initial spark of anger is continually fanned into a roaring inferno by repeated alcohol consumption, The reinforcing echo of her own violent intentions repeated to various confidants, and the persistent internal rumination on the humiliating act committed against her. During the course of this, while they're driving around, going places, Brandon's continually drinking. He's been drinking all day. This continuous and heavy intoxication would, tragically, become a critical element not only in the sequence of events, but also in ultimately assessing his own reliability as a witness, a crucial factor that prosecutors would inevitably have to contend with. At a certain point in their chaotic, liquor-fueled journey, with Brandon now deeply inebriated and likely unable to safely operate a vehicle, a critical shift occurred in the truck's operation. At this point, Brandon says to police that Angelita takes over driving. This crucial statement unequivocally placed Angelita squarely behind the wheel during the moments leading up to Brent's death, aligning precisely with the growing suspicions against her and the physical evidence later found. Brandon, heavily intoxicated, says his memory after that becomes hazy, a common and understandable claim when alcohol and trauma violently intersect. But he distinctly recalls a late-night stop at a local gas station. This fragmented yet powerful memory corroborated Officer Wolf's earlier sighting of Brent and a dark, unidentified car at the convenience store, creating another powerful and undeniable link in the chain of unfolding tragic events. Brandon then recounted the devastating confrontation. Brandon says that Angelita gets out the car because Brent's there and they start getting into this altercation. The bitter conflict that had simmered for hours, amplified by the searing humiliation of the Facebook posts and the disinhibiting effects of alcohol, had now erupted into a direct, physical altercation, a verbal and perhaps physical exchange that was the bitter fruit of their tortured relationship. Brandon, fading in and out of consciousness due to severe intoxication, says it lasts about 15 minutes. But again, he says he's so drunk that he's just kind of fading in and out the entire time. This admission of his profoundly impaired state simultaneously lent credence to his claims of haziness and, at the same time, ironically weakened his absolute reliability as an all-seeing witness, a delicate balance that prosecutors would have to painstakingly manage in the upcoming legal proceedings. Angelita, returning from the confrontational encounter, consumed by renewed fury, gets back into the car, slams the car door angrily, a percussive sound of her rage, and she peels out of the parking lot, her tires squealing as she speeds down these back roads of Cowpens. The scene was now irrevocably set for tragedy. An agitated driver consumed by vengeful rage, an intoxicated, fading passenger in the dark, deserted roads of a small town. It's dark. It's middle of the night. The stage was eerily quiet, save for the roar of the engine and the beating of her vengeful heart. Brandon, despite his profound haziness, retained a terrifying memory of what happened next. But he remembers seeing a person in front of the vehicle. His fragmented, alcohol-clouded memory still held on to this critical image, a dark shape in the pitch darkness that was soon to become terrifyingly clear, unmistakably identifiable. He reacts an instinctual, primal warning. He tells her to be careful that someone's walking, a final, desperate plea for caution. But Angelita, in a chilling act of cold, calculated intent, ignores him. Instead, she turns on the brights, cutting through the darkness, realizes that it's Brent Tasneer, now unmistakably identified, and she floors it. This is a horrifying climax of Brandon's testimony, a moment of stark, cold-blooded premeditation. The final, irrevocable decision to commit murder. The deliberate act of flooring it upon identifying a victim unequivocally confirmed the earlier suspicions of malicious intent, transforming the vehicle into a lethal weapon. She runs them over. The blunt, unvarnished statement, devoid of any embellishment or sensationalism, carries the full, crushing weight of the horrifying act. Brandon, witnessing the immediate aftermath of such an unthinkable and brutal act from the passenger seat, begins to descend into a desperate panic. Brandon starts to freak out, tells her to go back. A visceral, primal reaction to the horror unfolding before him. But Angelita's response was chillingly calm and utterly devoid of remorse. And she goes, "Don't worry, he'll be fine," and she drives off. Her callous dismissal of profound severity of her act, her utter and terrifying lack of concern for Brent's immediate welfare, spoke volumes about her emotional state, her intent, and her deep-seated rage. Don't worry, he'll be fine, in the horrific context of deliberately running someone over, is a profoundly disturbing and deeply pathological statement, indicative of either extreme psychological denial, sociopathic disregard for human life, or a cold, calculated belief that he deserved such a brutal and definitive fate. Brandon's prolonged silence was then questioned. He was asked, "Why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you tell us what happened that night?" He expressed a common human fear, that he was concerned because his truck was the truck that was used, that, he was going to get in trouble for this. His palpable fear of reprisal, or being implicated as an accomplice, is a very common psychological barrier to coming forward in criminal cases, particularly when substance abuse has already compromised one's position. Despite Brandon's admitted intoxication, his harrowing account, fragmented though it might have been, remarkably and consistently matched the critical physical evidence found on his truck and at the scene. This powerful convergence of testimonial and physical evidence greatly strengthened the overall case against Angelita, creating a compelling, if complex, narrative. But when investigators eventually confronted Angelita with this mounting evidence and Brandon's accusations, her account was, predictably, strikingly different, a carefully constructed narrative of self-preservation. She's brought in. She's not under arrest at this point. She's asked to kind of tell us what happened that day, a standard investigative approach aimed at drawing out her version of events before directly confronting her with contradictory evidence. She cautiously admitted to going to other people's houses and to making those statements about being angry at him for that Facebook post. But she defensively makes it sound like she's saying all of it in jest, attempting to downplay the lethal intent behind her earlier, explicit death threats. She tried to frame her actions as understandable, albeit emotional, reactions, rather than cold, premeditated intent. She did see those explicit pictures, she conceded, but defensively claimed this was still the father of her kids, and that she would never wish him harm, or death, an attempt to cloak herself in the mantle of a grieving mother and a strange wife. Rather than a vengeful murderer, she adamantly denies that she played a role in his death, creating an absolute counter-narrative. However, the detectives, experienced in parsing human deception, found a critical and ultimately fatal flaw in Angelita's carefully constructed alibi, a subtle inconsistency that shattered her credibility in a strikingly simple, yet profoundly effective way. Angelita claims Brandon dropped her off at a friend's house around 1 a.m. and continued partying. Without her, when Angelita's kind of recounting that night with law enforcement, she's pretty emphatic, and she tells them, "I was not in that car during the time that Brent was killed." This precise statement, uttered with a degree of certainty that was meant to impress, contained its own fatal flaw, a slip of the tongue that betrayed her direct involvement. But that's the interesting part. Nobody in the family knew at that point in time what time Brent was killed. The victim's actual time of death had not yet been released to the public or even to the family members, a fact known only to a very select few involved in the investigation. This crucial discrepancy provided the opportunity for a psychologically insightful question. My question to her was, if you were not there, then how did you know when his time of death was? The analyst notes the devastating power of this simple, yet incredibly incisive rhetorical question. It was a perfectly executed psychological trap, expertly laid, that revealed her intimate, first-hand knowledge of the exact time of the murder, information she could not possibly have possessed unless she was physically present during the event. She could not answer that. Her profound inability to provide any coherent explanation for this glaring inconsistency spoke, louder and more damningly than any word she could have uttered. The chilling implication was undeniable, a truth revealed through her unwitting confession. The reason she knows that is because she's in the car and she's the one that ran him over. Her carefully constructed alibi, in one simple question, had crumbled into dust. Detectives, now highly confident in her guilt and her deception, kept Angelita in custody, leveraging their legal authority while they redoubled their efforts to find unimpeachable physical evidence that would definitively link her to the hit-and-run murder. Brandon's white truck, by now considered the primary murder weapon, had been taken into custody by law enforcement to kind of do a review of what's inside of it. A thorough and painstaking forensic examination of the vehicle itself was critical to corroborating the human testimony with irrefutable, objective science. What they found, nestled within the confines of the vehicle, provided additional, powerful corroboration. In the center console is Brandon Blackwood's wallet with his ID, and then in the pocket of the driver's side door is Angelita Wright's driver's license. This seemingly minor detail, the precise location of her identification, was, in fact, a crucial, irrefutable piece of physical evidence, a quiet bombshell of forensic revelation. Finding her driver's license in a door-side pocket would naturally raise some serious questions. It's not her vehicle. If she has never been on the driver's side of that truck, how would it end up in that pocket? The indelible presence of her official identification in the driver's side door, an area unequivocally associated with the person operating the vehicle, provided compelling physical corroboration of Brandon's claim that she was unequivocally behind the wheel. It tied Angelita directly, physically, and powerfully to the act in a way that mere wavering testimony, subject to human frailties, could not achieve. On December 31st, 2015, a mere 4 days after Brent Tessner's brutal death, Cowpens police, having methodically amassed sufficient and compelling evidence, and with Angelita's carefully constructed alibi utterly shattered, officially arrested Angelita Wright for his murder. The swiftness of the arrest, coming just days after profound horror of the crime, speaks volumes about the efficacy, diligence, and relentless pursuit of justice demonstrated by the investigative team. The ripple effects of her arrest were immediate and tragically impacted her family. After Angelita is arrested, she and Brent's 3 young kids go and live with her grandmother, another devastating and innocent consequence of one person's unchecked rage. In a crucial decision that would significantly impact the future trajectory of the case, and based on the nuanced understanding of Brandon's role that night, they decided not to charge the other person in the car, Brandon Blackwood, with any crime. Brandon's just a witness in this case. He doesn't appear to have been acting in concert with Angelita and running over Brent Tessner. This critical legal distinction was vital. Brandon, despite his presence and intoxication, was deemed a passenger and eyewitness, not a proactive participant or instigator. His culpability mitigated by his impaired state and apparent lack of direct, proactive intent to cause harm. With an arrest made and a narrative solidifying, the prosecutors were able to set a court date, signaling that the formal legal process was now fully in motion. However, despite these advancements, the police were still diligently collecting evidence, recognizing that the pursuit of truth is an ongoing and multifaceted endeavor, often extending beyond the immediate arrest. Unfortunately, the promising leads gleaned from the initial forensic examination of the truck, the very vehicle that served as a murder weapon, yielded a mixed and ultimately inconclusive bag of results, a frustrating setback for the investigative team. DNA results from the hair and blood samples collected from the grill of the truck proved to be inconclusive. This outcome, while disappointing, is a common and often unavoidable challenge in forensic science, particularly when delicate samples are exposed to the unpredictable variables of the real world. Environment. What we learned from a forensic analysis of the truck is that really nothing existed. That spot that they thought was blood ended up not being blood. They weren't able to make a match on the hair around the bolt on the front of the car. The absence of definitive DNA evidence directly linking Brent to the truck was a significant setback, stripping away a potentially powerful and irrefutable objective link between Angelita and the crime. Seen, forcing the prosecution to rely more heavily on other forms of evidence. However, experienced forensic teams understand the practical limitations of such analysis. There was all kinds of reasons why that blood, or that DNA, may not come back as a match. Rain, weather, it's on the outdoor of a truck. All these things can affect the sample. Forensic analysis, though undeniably scientific and highly precise, is always subject to the environmental realities of a crime scene, where nature and the elements can degrade or wash away crucial traces. Without direct, definitive physical evidence, the prosecution's case now hinged precariously on Brandon's often inconsistent testimony, and the seasoned prosecutors knew with chilling certainty that the defense would relentlessly present him as an unreliable, malleable witness. He was drunk that night, admittedly drunk, so there's going to be a few things that you have to take into account. The defense, employing established legal strategies, would undoubtedly attack Brandon's credibility, challenge his memory, and question his motivations for testifying, exploiting every weakness. The solicitor's office, acutely aware of these vulnerabilities and preparing for the inevitable legal battle, judiciously brought in Brandon to help prepare him for trial. This rigorous preparation is an extremely common and vital practice in legal proceedings. What they typically do is run through their questions with them, and then they also try to prepare him for cross-examination. This intense, simulated courtroom pressure is meticulously designed to ensure a witness's consistency, composure, and resilience under the fierce scrutiny of legal challenge. However, during the sensitive preparatory process, a deeply concerning and problematic dynamic began to emerge with Brandon, exposing his psychological frailties. They start to realize that he looks extremely nervous, that he looks fidgety, that he's being pretty evasive. The physical manifestations of his anxiety, the clear nonverbal cues, signal deep discomfort and a profound potential for testimonial instability. The legal team, now on high alert, began to really poke and prod him, probing deeper into his evasiveness. Is there a specific reason why you don't want to answer these questions? Is it because maybe you were more involved? This direct line of questioning bore a necessity and a dawning apprehension, pushed Brandon to his breaking point. Then they start to really interrogate him. This escalated interrogation, designed to extract the true reason for his reluctance, yielded a truly terrifying and potentially catastrophic result for the prosecution's entire case. Instead of his testimony becoming stronger and more resolute, it suddenly changes and potentially blows up their entire case. In a stunning, courtroom-shattering reversal, Brandon now says that he's driving the car. In this new, shocking narrative, Angelita keeps telling him, run him over, do it. He's right over there. And he ultimately does. This latest confession was a seismic shock, a catastrophic shift that dramatically placed the murder weapon firmly in Brandon's hands, not Angelita's, thereby fundamentally undermining the entire prosecution narrative against Angelita and jeopardizing the painstakingly built case. Authorities, faced with this dramatic, bewildering, and 11th-hour confession from their key witness, had no choice but to immediately arrest Brandon, leveraging their legal power, while they frantically attempted to sort through his wildly varying and profoundly contradictory statements. The integrity of the justice system demanded a complete and immediate reevaluation of the charges. The overarching question that paralyzed the legal team was simply, why is this story different now? Days before the trial, now looming large and threatening to collapse. They are now scrambling to figure out, does this really change the entire trajectory of charging Angelita with a murder? This abrupt confession introduced massive reasonable doubt. At this point, her trial is put on hold because the whole case needs to be reassessed. A clear indication of the monumental uncertainty that now hung over proceedings. The legal machinery, precise, deliberate, and often agonizingly slow, had to pause, recalibrate, and confront this bewildering twist that threatened to unravel months of painstaking work. Less than a week after Brandon's shocking confession, authorities, determined to extract the elusive truth from his tangled narratives, conducted a crucial follow-up interview. Once again, under intense pressure, he changes his story, adding another layer of confusion by claiming he was mentally impaired during the initial trial. Preparation, offering an excuse for his prior flip-flopping. This latest iteration of Brandon's confession provided a glimpse into his psychological state during the tumultuous preparatory interviews. What we find out from Brandon is that he had smoked some weed beforehand because he was extremely nervous about meeting with law enforcement officers. This self-medication, a common coping mechanism for anxiety, undoubtedly compromised his judgment and his ability to adhere strictly to factual recollection. Under pressure, he further confessed that he started giving them answers that he thought they were looking for, rather than what actually happened. This is a common psychological phenomenon in highly stressful interrogations or testimonial situations, particularly for individuals prone to compliance or under the influence of substances. The powerful desire to please the questioner, to provide answers that alleviate immediate pressure or perceived threat, rather than to stick rigorously to the unvarnished truth, even if it implicates oneself. The analyst recognizes this as a compliant false confession, or at least compliant false statement, where an individual, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment and the power dynamic, yields to perceived authority and pressures. Brandon himself articulated this vulnerability with raw honesty. When I get intensely pressured, I break down. And when I break down, I get to a point where I say whatever I need to say. Didn't leave me alone. This poignant, albeit self-serving, explanation for his relentless vacillations illuminated his profound psychological vulnerability to coercion and his compromised ability to withstand intense, prolonged psychological pressure, rendering his testimony volatile and unpredictable.